Let us pay homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Let us take the three refuges. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Okay, we shall now chant the verses to observe the 5 precepts. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sura meraya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Good morning, brothers and sisters of the Dhamma. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have Ajahn Nissarano, who was born 1952 in Perth, Australia. In 1997, he was ordained by Ajahn Brahm as a novice monk, and a year later took full ordination. This year was his 22nd year as a fully ordained Buddhist monk. He has been living in Sri Lanka since June 2006. During this time, he lived for 8 years in a cave on the side of a mountain, surrounded by forests, and going to the village below for alms round. He returns to Australia annually to teach primarily at the Buddhist Society of Victoria. Let's welcome Ajahn Nissarano.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd just like to introduce myself to those who don't know me. My name is Ajahn Nissarano, or Venerable Nissarano, and I'm an Australian monk who ordained with Ajahn Brahm, who's very well known, 23 years ago. But for the last 14 years, I've been living in Sri Lanka. Of course, this last year, I've been here in Australia, courtesy of COVID-19. And for 8 of those years that I was in Sri Lanka, just before I left, actually, I was living in a cave and in the forest on the side of a mountain and going alms round every day into the village. Very nice, actually. And now I'm staying at Newbury Monastery, and the setting you see is the shrine room in the monks' Sangha house in Newbury in Victoria, Australia. It's all very international these days. So we can begin this talk, but before the talk, we can have a guided meditation. And this is a good way for us to settle down, to make the mind peaceful and come into the present moment. So I'd like you to join me in meditation. First of all, by closing our eyes. This is a good way to come in contact with the body. And checking out how the body is. We can move it to relax the body. And of course, very important is to go through the body from the top of the head to the feet, giving the body, starting at the top of the head, this mental massage, giving it this warm, kind, relaxing attention. So we let go of any tension, any stiffness, any painful areas. We can soothe them with this warm, kind attention. So if you'd like to scan the body from head to toe, giving this warm, kind, massaging attention. And now I'd like you to bring to mind the qualities of a best friend, the kindness, the warmth, the sense of being relaxed with this person. All the qualities you associate with a best friend, someone who is there for you in good times and difficult times. And I'd like you to, whatever feeling you get from thinking of the qualities of good friend, to get this feeling, usually a warm feeling, a kind feeling, sense of connection, give it to yourself, give it to the body and to the mind. The sense of being our own best friend. Understanding, forgiving, kind. And we can breathe in the sense, this feeling of being our own best friend. Breathe it in and then breathe it out to the world, sharing this feeling of being the best friend of all beings. Breathing it in and then breathing it out. And now, as we're coming close to the end of the very brief meditation, just to reflect on how we feel now and what has caused what we're feeling to come up. And now we can slowly come out of meditation and open the eyes and move the body. So I hope that helped to come into the present moment and to bring that sense of metta, kindness, into the present moment. I always find the idea of the best friend, this is a concept, a very useful way to develop that feeling of metta, which some people find difficult. In the past few months, I've been giving a series of talks, progressive talks, and this is in fact part of that series. And we're starting by talking about views. Views, this is in the Pali Ditti, and how they shape our experience of life and how they shape, limit our perceptions and thoughts. And in a very real sense, the views that we have also prevent us from the arising of right view. And right view, of course, is where allows the path to arise and for us to practice, develop the Noble Eightfold Path to awakening. I focus particularly on a view that is very important in the West, probably in Singapore it may be similar to, and this is one that often people believe that there is no life after death. And so I gave a talk, I did a series actually, Only the Body Dies. Is there life after death? So this is an important view. But of course these views the Buddha considered as wrong views. Wrong in what sense? They prevent us from developing the Noble Eightfold Path to awakening, to enlightenment. And of course the Buddha was mainly concerned about right view, because right view is what the Buddha saw from his own experience. It's not a theory that he thought out. It was from his own experience, this right view, which is in accordance with reality, and it leads to awakening. So this right view is very important, and I gave a talk about that. And it's also, right view is I call it the gateway to stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment. So this talk will focus on the insight that makes a person a stream enterer. And the insight that does that, of course, is anicca, impermanence. And this is such an important, pivotal insight that brings up, makes possible the first stage of enlightenment. So this talk will be called Impermanence, the Wisdom that Frees Us. So I think it's, I often reflect, in Buddhism we have so many talks on impermanence that why do we need another talk on impermanence? And isn't impermanence obvious to us? Because everybody can observe it externally. They can see others growing older. They can see them becoming sick, or also family and friends dying, and pets dying. This is actually something that really affects people too. And also we see a lot of it on the news, don't we? Especially with COVID-19, a lot of news about death. We see lots of things, news about wars, destruction, that sort of thing. We can see the changes in the weather, and we can see, the things around us, the buildings, the possessions we have, aging, breaking down, and needing maintenance. And we can see in ourselves too, I do, as I'm getting older, that our bodies are constantly needing attention. They're shoring them up, we say, like a building. And we all know that our bodies must one day die, but we tend to ignore it. And also we see impermanence internally, don't we? in terms of our moods. They come and they go like the weather. Our feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts, and will too, our intentions are changing rapidly and sometimes quite dramatically. So what blocks us from seeing impermanence? This is so we're obviously not seeing it at a deep level. So what blocks us from seeing our experience is, the Buddha talked about it, the distortions of perception, the sanya vipalasas, or the inversions of perceptions. And this is a very important teaching that, of course, when you talk about views, ditthi, comes up a lot. We want, most people want some things, probably not everything, to be permanent. They want to have permanent, in particular, permanent happiness and a sense of a permanent me or an I, myself. This is what people are seeking for. So the Buddha talked about this and how our views affect our perceptions, how they condition them. We only see according to those views. And in turn, these perceptions, they give rise to our thoughts, which in turn reinforce our perceptions, our views, sorry. So this is the nature of views, actually, and the nature of the distortions of reality, which give rise to the fact that we don't see impermanence. And a few years ago, I had a friend sent a video to me that really struck a chord, actually. And it showed this man on a beach in India, and he had one of these floor wipers, you know, that you use for pushing water into the drain in a bathroom or wherever. But he was at the beach, and there he was with this floor wiper, pushing the waves back into the sea. And it really hit home to me. I thought, this is what we're doing. We're trying to push the waves of reality back into the sea. And what are those waves? Of course, it's impermanence, it's unsatisfactoriness, and not self or non-self. These are the waves that we resist. We wish to push back at all costs. So this is why we are not seeing impermanence at that deep level. We want to try and control conditions. We want to get this sense of permanent stability, permanent happiness, to find that permanent happiness and find this sense of a permanent me. So what does anicca mean? You know, anicca, we say impermanence in English, but I find the word impermanence doesn't have much emotional impact for me. And often a very good, for me, a good definition would be nothing lasts, nothing lasts. And I think that gives much more of an emotional impact to it. And of course you see this with the ruins. When you go on a pilgrimage to India and see the Buddhist sites, you see ruins. And it really, I mean, that shows you impermanence. These vast monasteries and universities that now are just all rubble, but still peaceful places. But other translations I like, and they capture something of it too, is the transience or inconstancy, that sense of continually moving, constantly in motion. And this is as they have this idea, and the Buddha mentions it, of hurrying and hastening through samsara. This is what we're doing. We're constantly on the move. And this is, in fact, the nature of reality. And one of the most compelling ways of rendering anicca too is uncertainty. And because the uncertainty that it brings up a lot of insecurity in us, which we are experiencing at the moment with COVID-19. People are finding there's a lot of insecurity, anxiety around COVID-19. And of course, this relates to Ajahn Chah. Ajahn Chah often translated or used not sure or uncertain for anicca, and that captures that sort of sense of unpredictability unreliability, the unexpected, and the sense that there's nothing fixed, there's nothing to hang on to, and that's quite a frightening concept, isn't it? When you think of it, and unstable. And one of the a nice quotation from Ajahn Chah that captures some of this is about his experience when he was and this is to do with ruins again, when he was a layman with his friends looking at ancient monasteries, probably Khmer monasteries, ruins in Thailand that were cracked and broken, beautiful places, but broken down like they are in India. And he would say, his friends would say to him, "Oh, what a shame that it's broken, isn't it? It would be such a beautiful place." So he even thought that himself, but then he said to his friends, and this is the quotation, "If it wasn't cracked like that, there wouldn't be any Buddha. I'd say it really heavy for the benefit of my friends, but perhaps they weren't listening. But still, I was listening." And he listened very well, didn't he, really? Because he understood impermanence very, very deeply and was able to convey it to so many people throughout the world. So impermanence is not just a word, and that this is important to remember. It's like what Ajahn Chah said, you can read the word anger, you can have this word anger, but the feeling of anger is quite different from the word. It's more three-dimensional. So this understanding of anicca is a direct insight or knowledge. Sometimes they call this abhinya, or seeing and knowing, it will change us from being a worldly person to someone who's actually on the path. We're not really on the path. We're not even become learners until we become stream interest. It's rather sobering, isn't it, when you think of it? So if we haven't experienced stream entry, then we don't really know what anicca means. We don't know the Four Noble Truths. And I like to use the story of Venerable Assaji. Some of you may know this story, and it sort of illustrates some of the meaning of anicca, of impermanence. Venerable Assaji was one of the first 5 disciples of the Buddha. You probably know that. And he was in Rajagaha. That's a place where the Buddha often went, to the Vulture's Peak, the Gijjakuta, and he was going on alms round there. And the Venerable Sariputta, he saw him going on alms round, and he was really struck by the fact that this person was so peaceful, so restrained, elegant, really, in the way they conducted themselves. And this really made him want to find out what this person had understood. And so he followed him after he'd finished his alms round, and asked him, "Who is your teacher? And what does your teacher teach?" And of course he said, he didn't say, he said the great samana, so this is the Buddha. And then he said these words, which are classics, actually. He said, "Whatever things arise from a cause, of them the Tathagata," that's the Buddha, "has told the cause, and of the cessation of them, such is the teaching proclaimed by the great Samana," the Buddha. So that's what he said to Venerable Sariputta. It's quite interesting, even though Venerable Assaji was an Arahant, he said, "Well, I'm only new to the teaching, so this is, I can give you a brief idea." And so the arising from a cause, what's that? Arising from a cause. This is the idea that causes and conditions give rise to something, like cause and effect. It means that something having arisen, having had a cause, it arises. And of course, anything that arises has to eventually pass away, no matter how long that takes. will break down and disintegrate. So anything that has this conditionality, arises from causes and conditions, is of a nature to be impermanent, has to be. And when you think of it, this is everything in the world. This is everything in the world. And we mentioned, so that's where he says, whatever things arise from a cause, of them the Tathagata has told the cause. So the cause, of course, is initially conditionality. This cause, things arising from a cause, from a condition. This is hence impermanent. And then, but also told the cause also reminds us, doesn't it, of the second noble truth, that the cause of unsatisfactoriness, of suffering in this world, is actually wanting or craving. This is the cause of the difficulties we find ourselves in. So that's the cause. And the Buddha mentions, and the cessation. And cessation, of course, is the ending of something. It's a natural process, actually, isn't it? It's not something we force. So it shows the impermanence or the impermanence of the causes and conditions that support something finishing, like this body. When the causes and conditions for the body to be alive cease, then the body will pass away, and then it will die. So, but at a deeper level too, there's also the level of the cessation, can be the level of the cessation of wanting, of craving, of desire. This is the third noble truth. So it's looking at that. And when Venerable Sariputta heard this, he immediately, so it says, became a stream enterer, just hearing this verse. And we often, the classic way of talking about somebody becoming a stream enterer is that the dustless, stainless eye of the Dhamma had arose. And we have the Pali, Yam Kinchi Samudaya Dhammang Sabantang Nirodha Dhammanti. And of course that means whatever is of the nature to arise, samudaya, all that is of a nature to cease. And this is the insight of a stream enterer. When you see that, you probably think, wow, is that enough? But it is seeing that conditionality and seeing deeper, because that conditionality links up with dukkha, with suffering, with unsatisfactoriness. This is where it ties in with the Four Noble Truths. And this is why Venerable Anya Kandanya, the first of the 5 monks to become a stream enterer after the Buddha, gave the first teaching on the turning of the wheel, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And what was even more interesting is after he had become a stream enterer, he went to see his friend, and his friend noticed that his complexion, he looked very radiant and vibrant. And he asked him, have you seen the deathless? And he said, yes, I have seen the deathless. And he recited that verse that I mentioned from Venerable Assaji, and he too became a stream enterer. Now, you've all heard it. Are you stream enterers? I think some of you have probably, like myself too, have heard it a number of times, but we're still not stream enterers. But it's interesting. This is obviously a key to stream entry, is seeing anicca in a very deep way, seeing impermanence. And so it's the essential aspect of it is conditionality, causes, that something that's impermanent arises from causes and conditions. And it's not which eventually will break down. And of course, that reminds us of this concept of entropy, doesn't it? That things tend to gradually decline. And we see this with the body, with all physical things particularly, that they're decaying, they're disintegrating over time. So it's so this is, but where it ties in, of course, impermanence is such an important part of reality. I call it the fly in the ointment of samsara, or the flaw in samsara. It's the essence of it. And as I mentioned, in many, many teachings, the Buddha connects impermanence to dukkha. He says, whatever is impermanent, which is everything that arises from a cause or a condition, that is unsatisfactory, gives rise to dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, to suffering. And because you can see very easily that it cannot provide permanent happiness. This is really what most people are seeking, is permanent happiness, something that lasts. That can give them satisfaction, a sense of stability. And so this, and of course, impermanence, everything is always changing, internally, externally. And so all these things are temporary. And then the Buddha connects this to whatever is dukkha, whatever is impermanent and dukkha. Of course, he says, this is not worthy of being called a self. We can't find a permanent self. If impermanence is the order of the day, if impermanence is everything that comes from, arises from a cause, then what about this me, this I that I take myself to be? This too is impermanent. So this is striking at the heart of it, of the essence of life, which is anicca, dukkha, anatta, isn't it? Impermanence, or nothing lasts, unsatisfactoriness, and also non-self. There's not a permanent happiness, there's not a permanent self. And then the Buddha usually says that one who sees non-self, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. So this is seeing deeply into non-self. And when that happens, he says, the mind becomes dispassionate. It is liberated from the taints, all the negativity, the deep negative roots in the mind, by non-clinging. And you can see that that sequence is very important in the sense of the stream enterer, because a stream enterer is a person who has destroyed or let go of personality view, this I, me, and my mind, this me here, that we see and we take as so real and so permanent. They have seen, that it's arising, our experience of who we are arises from causes and conditions. And the view that there's a person in here, a permanent, lasting person, has gone. The real impermanence has shown it's not possible. And conditionality shows that we are made up from our experiences of life. We're influenced by them. And so this is it's a very important connection between impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and also non-self. So I'd like to, in this talk, particularly talk about how do we develop our understanding of anicca, because I always like things to be a bit more practical, because we can talk about the philosophy and the theory, and that's all very good, but how do we develop it? And of course, the way we develop it is by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And really the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path. But the particular things we need to develop the perception and insight into impermanence is, of course, right view is the first part of it. That things, that focusing on cause and effect, conditionality, as I mentioned, we have the Paticca Samuppada, that's the teaching on the arising of dukkha and also the cessation of dukkha. So this is a very important sense of teaching on conditionality. So the right view, of course, is emphasizing permanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And of course, the Four Noble Truths. And we need this right effort to overcome the negative states of mind and to develop the wholesome states of mind, the positive states of mind. So this is, in essence, is what we're doing when we let go of the 5 hindrances in meditation. This is really where we can, the mind can develop some purity and can see things clearly, because this is one of the conditions for developing insight, is that purity of mind that's not affected by the 5 hindrances, any negative forces. And we need right mindfulness in order to do this, to develop samadhi. Because once the mind has developed samadhi, this one-pointedness of mind, then the hindrances, the distortions of reality are gone. So that's very important. And of course, once we, after we have purified the mind with samadhi, then we can see things as they are. And we can see things, in meditation that disappeared. And, often in Ajahn Brahm mentions in deep meditation that the body and the 5 senses disappear. The sense of self is also on hold. And also the thinking has gone. So we see a lot of things disappearing. And this gives us some insight. We can develop insight based on that. So the Buddha encourages us to develop the insight into impermanence by developing the perception of impermanence. And he talks about this in the famous sutta, the Girimananda Sutta. I'm sure you've heard it. Also in the Satipatthana Sutta, it's mentioned too, impermanence. And it's usually the impermanence of the 5 aspects or components of personality, or the personality, the Panchupadana Khandha, as they call it in Pali. And to see their arising and passing away moment by moment. And one of my favorite ways of, because that always, when you read this, about the arising and passing away of form and of feeling, perceptions, will or intention, consciousness, it all sounds very theoretical. But I love one of the teachings where the Buddha gives his own experience of life, of his own experience of, and which shows very clearly, how we can develop it. And this is in the marvelous and wonderful, what's wonderful and marvelous sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. And this, in the sutta, the Venerable Ananda is giving a list of incredible things that relating to the Buddha, his birth, miraculous birth, and the fact that he was conscious when he was born and so forth. But then at the very end, the Buddha gives something that he considers wonderful and marvelous. And it's of a completely different order. It's quite wonderful, actually. And he says, that being so, Ananda, remember this too as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata Buddha. Here, Ananda, the Tathagata, here for the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, and as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, and as they disappear. Remember this too, Ananda, as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata Buddha. Isn't that, to me, that's quite, it's a wonderful thing. It's very, very down to earth. It's more experiential than sometimes when we read the descriptions of it, of developing these perceptions and developing the insight into anicca, arising, passing away. That's part of it. So we can develop this perception of anicca through at a number of different levels. And so I'll do some short meditations for those, so we can do that too. We can develop it at a momentary level, and this is what the Lord Buddha was doing when he described that wonderful and marvelous quality that was on a very much a momentary level. And it's very interesting to see there's feelings, perceptions, and thoughts. They're recurring for the Buddha, the Lord Buddha. And he was aware of them in that detail. That is extraordinary. When we think of ourselves, are we aware of our feelings, perceptions, and thoughts in that detail? It's extraordinary, isn't it? It needs a lot of mindfulness, a lot of samadhi to do that. So there's that level, at the momentary level we just described with the Lord Buddha. And after deep meditation is another possibility. I mentioned that just a little while ago. And we can actually develop the experience of past lives. And that certainly will give the understanding of anicca in a very direct way. But it's also, we can develop the perception, the insight into impermanence by contemplating birth, old age, sickness, and death. This is a very important one, and one that the Buddha emphasized again and again. So, and also we can see impermanence on a cosmic level. So we can see that when the Buddha is talking about impermanence, he's talking about everything in the world, that people are used to, that know from experience. So the first one, as I mentioned, will be at the momentary level. And so I'd like to, we're aiming with this, and this, you see this in Satipatthana too, is seeing the arising and passing away of body, feelings, and mental states. So just for the moment, if you can close your eyes and come into the present, there's only a few moments actually, and let go of the past and the future. And we can pay attention to our breath, just to stabilize the mind, to calm the mind down for a few moments. And now we can look at what we're experiencing in this body and mind in terms of beginning, persisting, and passing away or ending. And we can look at this in terms of the body, particularly in our sense experiences. We're hearing, smelling, or experiencing touch in the body, seeing it in terms of beginning, persisting, and passing away. Or we can notice it in the mind in terms of the feelings we're experiencing, whether they be a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling or a neutral feeling. You can see them beginning, persisting, and passing away. And we can become aware of our perceptions related to the body or the mind and be aware of them, beginning or arising, persisting and passing away, particularly things like warmth or coolness, hardness or softness, pressure or lightness, tension or relaxation, agitation or peacefulness. Whatever perceptions we are aware of arising, persisting and passing away. And now we can be aware of our intentions or will, how we are reacting to what we're experiencing, noticing the arising, persisting and passing away. Do we want to move? Do we want to get something? Do we want to get rid of something? Do we want to change things? So we can now slowly come out of meditation, just a brief meditation, just to experience that at a momentary level. And of course, as I mentioned, for the Lord Buddha, one of the ways that he developed the perception of anicca and the insight into anicca was, of course, on the night of his enlightenment, when he saw millions upon millions of previous births. And so he was seeing that he was this person with this name, from this clan, who had this food, who had these problems, who passed away, and so on, and then was reborn. So he saw anicca in a very graphic way, actually. And so this is the basis for his understanding, direct experience of it. And of course, if we, as Ajahn Brahm likes to encourage us, if we've had a deep meditation, it's an opportunity, if the mind is reasonably still, quite still, we can ask ourselves what our earliest memory is. And then from that, go back and say earlier and see if we can experience a past life. And as Ajahn Brahm often mentions, if people experience their death in a previous life, and they get very scared, of course, it's an unpleasant experience, then to say earlier, go earlier. So if we see a previous life, of course, that's going to give us direct experience of anicca in the sense of death and rebirth, something we don't see in this life, we can see from our experience of past lives. And it will reduce our fear of death and also bring up quality of faith. And this quality of faith, of course, is one of the things, or confidence is one of the things that a stream enterer has unshakably. And it will confirm us. We will understand that the Dhamma is a reality for us. So, and of course, I mentioned that we can also develop perception of impermanence, that nothing lasts, in terms of our experience of birth, old age, sickness, and death. This is something that we all have with us. Having a body, we will definitely experience these things. Has to. And it's good to recall that this is actually the reason that the Buddha left the palace, because he was driven by this sense of looking for something, the solution to how to overcome a birth or rebirth, old age, sickness, and death. This was his mission, the noble quest, as they often call it. And we have the 5 daily recollections, which come up in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, where we can reflect on old age, sickness, death, being parted from all that is dear and delightful, and also that we are the owners of our own karma. And we can do this by reflecting, I am of the nature to grow old, I'm of the nature to become sick, I'm of the nature to die. And also that all that is dear and delightful to me, I will be parted from, or it will become otherwise. And I cannot avoid it. So these recollections are very important ways to see anicca. And the purpose of them is twofold. First of all, because they reduce our negative qualities, our defilements, and this is one of the important aspects of it. But they also provide the platform for, as the Buddha said, for the path to arise. And how that happens, he mentions, is once we realize, once we contemplate, all beings are of this nature to experience old age, sickness, death, being parted from that which is dear and delightful, and that we are all owners of our karma. So when that is seen, then we can make that breakthrough. And so one of the nice stories we can read is about the Venerable Kema. She was one of the nuns who was foremost in wisdom amongst the bhikkhunis. And the Buddha actually, she was very reluctant to come and see the Buddha because definitely she was very beautiful. She was the wife of King Bimbisara, and but the king managed to have musicians and poets compose things about the Balavana, the monastery, the bamboo grove, and she was interested to go and visit. And then she met the Buddha, and sure enough, the Buddha, he evidently conjured up an image of a celestial nymph, a beautiful person who was even more beautiful than Kema. And then before her eyes, she could see this beautiful nymph aging gradually, and then collapsing, and the body dying and becoming a corpse. When she saw that, according to this story, then she became an arahant. So we can just briefly do a guided meditation on just bringing up our past memories, and particularly I find very useful is like photos that we remember, because that actually brings up different stages of our lives, and so that can be a very graphic way to do it. So we can close our eyes for a moment, come into the present moment. And we can contemplate ourselves aging from our earliest memory into primary school, then growing up, going to secondary school or upper school, becoming an adult, and the process of aging, remembering the photos or remembering those things that were so important at different stages in our lives. It's quite interesting to do that, which might be, sights, sounds, smells, tastes and touches, or thoughts and feelings. And they can be associated with people, with the music we like, the things that are so important, the possessions, the education, the friends, as I mentioned, people, religion, whatever, politics, whatever. And so just to review our lives in terms of these images from earliest days to where we are now. And we can just investigate, am I the same as that now? It's always a very interesting thing to reflect on. And are those things that were so important in my life in the past, are they still so important? And now we can slowly come out of meditation. And I mentioned another level of seeing impermanence is the cosmic level. And the Buddha talks about this in the Seven Suns Sutta, where he talks about the destruction of the earth by the sun. So I won't go into that very much, but he says that the thing that's very interesting, so impermanent are conditioned things, he says, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become disenchanted with all conditioned things, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them. So this is right at the cosmic level of the earth being destroyed, which is quite an interesting contemplation. And recently someone told me that there's been a collision of two black holes. Who knows when this happened? It's probably a long time ago, and it's releasing huge amount of energy. And somebody said it was equivalent to 7 suns. So I thought, oh, this reminds me of that sutta. And that was heating up the earth, which may be one of the factors in it. So what is the wisdom of anicca that frees us? I'd just like to finish up very soon with that. When we have this, we keep in mind this understanding, this wisdom that's in accord with nature, in accord with reality, the impermanence, everything, nothing lasts. When we expect the unexpected, that's another way of doing it, of looking at it, we have less suffering and more peace and happiness. We actually flow with things much more. We're more accepting. And it reminds me of Ajahn Chah. He said, when we understand that impermanence is part and parcel of life, then it's like a dam that has a spillway. If the dam has a spillway, the excess water, instead of it can flow off safely and the dam is fine, it's safe. But if there is no spillway, then that water will destroy the dam. The dam wall will break and there'll be much destruction and devastation below that dam. So if we, in the same way, if we have this spillway of understanding that yes, impermanence is part of life, then our dam wall, our world, our life won't be swept away, won't be broken. When things like deaths of those that are near and dear to us occur, when we lose our job, when relationships break up, when all these things that can happen. So this is part of the wisdom of impermanence. And also that uncertainty, when we know that, yes, uncertainty, impermanence is certain. It is certain it will happen. And when what is impermanent is actually a permanent phenomena, actually permanently happening. We have less suffering, and as I say, we flow with nature. We aren't fighting with reality. We're not on the beach like that man I described with the floor wiper who was pushing the waves back into the sea. So this is the wisdom of anicca that helps, that leads to freeing us. And of course, I like one of the sayings of the Buddha that is very, very helpful in life to remember. Whatever you think it is, the reality is always different. Yena yena hi manyanti tato tang hoti anyata. It isn't certain. And of course, this is our bodies, our minds, the future, the permanence that we seek, happiness, beauty, and self, all these things. They're not what we think they are, and we discover that through our experience. So I'd like to get pretty close to the end with a story of impermanence. It's I think quite a lovely one. It's quite a positive one too, and it comes from Ajahn Nissarano, who you may know, a English monk living in Thailand, when he was a young man, he had this great desire to go to India to become a sadhu, even though he lived in Britain, in the UK. And he travelled across Europe and across the Middle East, down to India. And he was getting close. I think he was in Pakistan at this time. And he was on a bus going through the desert. And it was just, really desolate and barren. And one night on the bus, the rain came. It was deluged the desert, and he couldn't believe it. When the sun came up in the morning and the bus was still going through this desert landscape, there was an ocean, a sea of flowers of brilliant colours, turquoise and blues and yellows and golden colours everywhere. And this is. And he talks about it and says, and mentions this is a very good example of impermanence, of change, but it's also good in terms of thinking of ourselves. Sometimes we're going through the deserts of life, and to realize that this can all change very rapidly overnight, and to have faith that the flowers are there. So that's a nice story for about impermanence in a positive sense too. And it's also good because it allows us to not think of people as being fixed, other people as being fixed, or ourselves being fixed in a particular way, that they're always going to be like that permanently. So we can allow people benefit of the doubt, that realizing that they are conditioned like we are conditioned can change. So, and of course, the main purpose of this talk is, of course, is the main emphasis is that, of course, it is the gateway to stream entry, to the first stage of enlightenment. It's the deep insight that frees us from delusion, or also ignorance, we can say, avijja, from craving, reduces craving, and reduces our attachments, because we have seen through personality view, we have seen through doubt, we have seen through rites and rituals. These views no longer drive our lives. We've seen that everything that arises, all that is the nature to cease, and so can craving cease. So this brings the first stage of enlightenment, stream entry. So I'd like to finish there, and having talked about stream entry for anicca for quite a long time, impermanence, and to open up to any questions. If you have any questions, any comments, I often say, any complaints. So please, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask any questions before we share the merits. Can people have any questions? No?
Thank you, Ajahn, for the very inspiring talk. We have a few questions. The first question is, do you have any advice for people that have lost their jobs, or if they or their families have been infected by COVID virus, to be able to see anicca and to stay strong during this period?
Yes. I think one of the one very good way to deal with those things, and it's a very practical teaching, is this too will pass. This too will pass. That can be a great help. I know my mother, she really liked this teaching, actually, this too will pass. And I remember when she passed away, I found about 4 or 5 copies of a talk by Ajahn Nissarano on this too will pass. And so keeping that in mind, that this too will pass, that can be very, very helpful. But also very important at those times is to have a lot of kindness for oneself, to develop, to bring up that feeling of being a best friend to oneself, to give oneself support, that and give oneself this inner strength, because those times we feel very vulnerable, we feel very at risk. So to give that sense of stability to ourselves, that inner strength to ourselves, that kindness and understanding. So this can be very helpful for people who've lost their jobs, and also for those with COVID-19, who have developed COVID-19, And so of course, every difficult situation in life can also lead to opening doors that we hadn't expected. And I know somebody recently talked to me, or wrote to me an email actually, about Ajahn Covido. Ajahn Covido. It's quite clever actually. You may have heard of it actually already. Covido is the Pali word, but obviously it sounds like COVID. And of course, this is pointing to the fact that everything in life, the difficulties, actually are teaching us so much. At the time, we don't appreciate that lesson, but sometimes it can lead to real understanding and really coming to peace, and also seeing what is important in our lives, the people that are important, the things that are important in our lives. It gives us a real we really reevaluate. When you have lost your job, or you have COVID-19, or someone close to you has COVID-19, it really, it really makes life, the priorities in life stand out. Because of course, especially with COVID-19, the fear of death is there, and this really brings up what's really important in life, what's most important to us, but always to keep this kindness to ourselves. That's a great help, a great strength to develop. So I hope that's one answer to what to do if we've lost our job, or we've got a COVID-19. We've found out we have COVID-19, and of course, keeping in mind that all this is uncertain. What will happen next is uncertain, and as I said, this too will pass. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Dear Ajahn, thank you for the very insightful talk.
Yes.
What I would like to ask is, whenever one meditates, how does one see the wisdom of impermanence? Is there a trigger or something that allows one to see it when they meditate?
When they meditate, yes. Well, as I mentioned, we can see it on a momentary level, by focusing on what we're experiencing in the moment, whatever it be, and see that it's the beginning of it, the persisting of that, and the passing away of it. So this is one way we can do that. And what that does, it breaks up the sense of solidness that we have of things, and we can see the causes and conditions that apply. So this is one way we can do it. And also in meditation, if you have a deep meditation, as I mentioned, deep meditation is a very good way, particularly at the jhana level, as Ajahn Brahm's talking about. Once one comes out, one sees that, wow, the body wasn't there, the negative states of mind, the 5 hindrances weren't there, the sense of I and me wasn't there, the thinking wasn't there. So this is another way of seeing, because they've disappeared, it gives us can give us this understanding of anicca, the impermanence of it. Because for most of us, these things have always been there. And so then when we, in a deep meditation, that can be a real insight into it, because we can see that's not there now. So that is another way of doing it. And as I mentioned, these 5 contemplations, they can be daily, or they should be frequently, is good, of old age, sickness, death, and being parted from all that's dear and delightful, or that it can become otherwise. It won't be dear and delightful to us anymore. Or reflecting on our karma. That is one way we can do it. And the most important thing with any of those things is not actually, often not during the meditation, but after the meditation. If it's a good deep meditation, then those hindrances out of the way, and we have the opportunity to see very clearly, to see things more clearly, and then to contemplate old age, sickness and death as possible, then to ask ourselves, if we're towards the end of the meditation, what's our earliest memory? Ask the mind, not ourselves. We're asking the mind, what's the earliest memory, and then take it back further into a past life. These are all ways one can develop that wisdom of anicca. It's very important to realize, though, having said that these breakthroughs to insight can occur at most unexpected times. And you see that with the bhikkhuni Patachara. She was washing her feet before she went into a kuti, and the water just ran down the slope. It was running down the slope, ran a short distance and sunk into the ground, went further and sunk into the ground, and then went further still and sunk into the ground. And that was enough to give her an understanding of impermanence, deep understanding of impermanence, that she had experienced that for instance, her children had died as babies, her husband had died, they all died on the same day, they say, and then her parents had died. So these were different stages of life. So it's not necessarily while one is meditating, but there can be a trigger, maybe even seeing a man on a beach with a bathroom floor wiper trying to push the waves back. Maybe that will be a trigger for you. But suddenly it'll all come together and you think, yes, that's it. And that will be a direct experience. It's not an experience, not knowledge from a book. It'll be an insight that really goes to the heart and changes things, changes everything really, and frees you from, the suffering that comes from personality view, seeing this I, me, and mine here. And also not really knowing what the path is. This is rites and rituals. We have no idea. We're trying this, we try that. We think this is going to lead to enlightenment. You see many things that people think will lead to enlightenment. And also it abandons that sense of doubt. No longer are we trusting our own views. We're realizing that the Dhamma, this is the way. This can explain reality. It can take us all the way to enlightenment. That doubt is gone because we've seen from our own experience. So this is how we can do it, so, as it were. How we can do it. It'll happen. All right. I hope that sort of answered that for you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Ajahn.
All right. Are there any other questions before we?
I have another question over here. It's the last question.
All right.
We see thoughts and feelings come and go, but sometimes we still don't realize anything. Can Ajahn advise us? And another question is, seeing impermanence needs a lot of mindfulness. So for a busy lay person, is there no hope for us?
Right. Now, of course, we've all got the same capability, to realize the insight of impermanence, to develop the stages in life. That's a potential for all of us, given the right situations. And we don't know what we're bringing from a past life. And of course, yes, we do need a lot of mindfulness to see impermanence. But what we really need more than just mindfulness is purity of mind. We need a mind that is free of those 5 hindrances, and these are umbrellas, a term for all the negativities in the mind that are going to distort seeing reality. If we want to see something, like we want to find permanent happiness, permanent me, and all this sort of thing, it will distort reality. And if we're also trying to get rid of things, it will distort reality. And, the other hindrances, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt, they will all distort. So those things are what we need to overcome. They are the gateway to deep meditation, but they're also the gateway to wisdom. Because until they're overcome, whatever we see will not be actually in accord with reality. So that is our job as meditators, as practitioners of the Noble Eightfold Path. And when we do that, we will find that the mind is much happier, because without those negative influences, negative hindrances, the mind will be much happier, much lighter. So yes, we do also see the other aspect of the question about, yes, we're all having thoughts and perceptions and feelings arising, and we're not seeing them like described by the Buddha. That's quite amazing. Some people might read that and think, well, big deal. But actual fact, if you look at your own experience, that is something incredible. It's like having a microscope that you can see what's going on in the mind. So, the purpose of the meditation, what the meditation will develop, is a certain level of equanimity in the mind, a balance in the mind. And this is very important for, as I say, seeing things rather than being them. So most of the times we have feelings, perceptions, and thoughts, and we are those feelings, we are those perceptions, we are those thoughts, and we're taken over by them. But when we've developed enough mindfulness, enough equanimity in the mind, then it's possible to get a little bit of distance where we're observing them. And as I say, in the hurly-burly of life, it's not always very easy. But of course, we have retreats. We have our, if we regularly meditate, there are opportunities to do it, actually. And the thing is, what we're doing is, in meditation, we're reconditioning the mind. And this is going to impact on our lives as well. We're taking what we develop on the cushion into our lives. So we're taking more mindfulness into our lives. We're taking more kindness into our everyday life. All those things that we're developing. What we're developing is by repeating something again and again, it becomes a stronger and stronger inclination of the mind to go that way, to look at life that way, to give strength to the mind for mindfulness to be much, much more aware. And also, develop these qualities like loving kindness, compassion, and joy with others, success, and also equanimity. So it is possible. We're working on it. And we can't tell when that insight will ripen and then develop into deep insight that frees us and allows the first stage of enlightenment to arise. So I hope that answers that question somewhat. Yeah, I know it's not easy. It's not easy because people have got busy lives, and there's lots of commitments, lots of responsibilities, and this keeps us busy. But if we're developing the good qualities in our lives, this is the most important thing, isn't it? That kindness, that gentleness to ourselves and others, loving kindness, all these good qualities, then we are progressing. We're progressing. We may not have seen anicca yet, but it's possible. And we don't know when it will be, the breakthrough will come. So thank you for that. And now,
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
so now we can share the merits with those that have passed away. And also, I like to make this a blessing too for those that are living who may be experiencing difficult times. And I also think of a friend in Sri Lanka whose birthday it is today, Deepti. So whoever you can think of who needs this support, or whoever's passed away, a family member or friend, so we can do that. Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Idang vonyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang vonyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang vonyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. May you abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may you maintain well-being in yourselves.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And I'd like to just say thank you to Eileen for organizing this, and also for Venerable Aranavihari, who's been helping with the technical side of this Zoom session. So thank you very much. So.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.